Hi, I'm Erica, one of the senior curriculum managers here at Magoosh and a GMAT expert. And in today's video, I'm going to give you 3 solid tips to help you get a 40 plus on the verbal section. Let's jump right in. My first tip for scoring high on the GMAT verbal section is to prioritize your weakest question type. Now, the reason for this is that the algorithm on the GMAT works across an entire section. So every single quant question is going to help determine the level for every other quant question, and every single verbal question is going to help determine the level for every other verbal question. So that means that the test isn't going to give you one difficulty level for sentence correction, one difficulty level for critical reasoning, and one difficulty level for reading comprehension. It's going to give you one difficulty level for verbal. So that means if you're performing significantly worse in one of the question types, it's going to pull down your difficulty level for the other question types as well. Now, this typically manifests in missing fewer questions overall, which seems like a good thing, but actually what it means is that your difficulty has been pulled down almost artificially in these other question types, resulting in a lower score overall. So takeaway here, focus on bringing your weakest question type up, and then once it's at the same level as your other question types, work on bringing them all up together, and this will result in the highest score. Tip number 2 for a high GMAT verbal score is to base your timing strategy on question type. Now, on the verbal section, you average out to just under 2 minutes per question, but that doesn't mean that you should be dedicating just under 2 minutes per question to every single question on the verbal section. In fact, that's definitely too much time for some questions and definitely too little time for others. A better call is to have preset time limits or time estimates for the different question types. So let's start with sentence correction. Since sentence correction is the question type with the least text and the least comprehension, those are typically going to be your time savers. I recommend somewhere between a minute and a minute and a half per question on sentence correction. Critical reasoning, on the other hand, is going to be one of your time eaters. So because each of these questions has its own passage and its own scenario to process, these typically take a little bit more time. I typically recommend somewhere in the realm of 2.5 to 3 minutes per question. And then reading comprehension is going to be right in the middle at 2 minutes per question. However, this is going to be a little bit trickier to time because some of that 2 minutes per question needs to go to the passage before you even get to the questions. So my recommended timing breakdown here is to spend half of that time on the passage and then half of that time on the questions. So a really good move here is to get familiar with about how long a shorter 3-question passage is and about how long a longer 4-question passage is. So just by sight, you can tell whether you should be spending 3 or 4 minutes on the passage. Then once you do that, you've got 1 minute for each of the remaining questions. Now, it's worth noting here that this doesn't mean you should be looking at the clock after every single question. In fact, that's actually going to slow you down. So these are really useful in practicing getting these timings down, but you're going to want to have kind of an internal clock to be able to tell whether you've spent too long or too short on a given question. Let me know if you'd like a video on how to time across the section as a whole and when you actually should look at the clock, because this is a strategy that a lot of test takers don't have down. And if you're interested in learning more about why it's so important to nail down your timing strategy, check out my video on how to avoid an average GMAT score, where getting your timing strategy right was one of my top 5 tips. And then my third and final tip for scoring high on the GMAT verbal section is to base your question strategy on question type. And specifically to have one strategy for sentence correction and one strategy for critical reasoning and reading comprehension. So let's start with sentence correction. On sentence correction, one of the very best moves is to use the answer choices to your advantage. By looking at the differences between them, you're going to be able to see the possible things that the question could be testing, or the possible things that will either make an answer right or make it wrong. So using the answer choices is actually going to help you get through that problem faster and focus your energies. On the other hand, on critical reasoning and reading comprehension, the answer choices are full of traps and mind games that the test maker is playing with you to try to get you to consider things that you would never think of otherwise, things that you would never come up with if this was a fill-in-the-blank test. So instead of letting the test maker play those mind games with you, instead don't look at the answer choices and predict your own answer first. Now, this seems like it's going to take significantly more time, but because it helps you trust yourself, someone who's on your side, rather than the test maker, someone who is actively trying to trick you, it's actually going to help you have a roadmap for dealing with those answer choices and get through those traps more effectively, more efficiently, and more confidently. And those are 3 of my top tips to help score a 40 plus on the GMAT verbal section. Now, of course, all of my tips for overall on the GMAT are going to help you on the verbal section specifically, so I really recommend checking out, in particular, my video on never making the same mistake twice for one of my other top tips on how to score high on GMAT verbal, but also on GMAT quant. Let us know by liking if this video helped you, and subscribe for more videos from me and the other experts at Magoosh. And as always, if you have suggestions for future videos or questions, leave them in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you soon.